Hi, love. You have to unmute yourself.
Touch your name, and then the drop down will come up.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, my tablet's old, so I have to do all kinds of stuff. I'm not the most tech savvy individual. Hello, all.
Hello, love.
Hello,
It is so good to see you. Oh my goddess.
Hey.
In a while. Yeah.
Hi, why don't I have a camera? Anybody have a thought?
You have to join with the camera. I'll usually ask you if you want to join with video or not.
I think we said yes.
I did, but it didn't work right.
Okay, let me try again. I'm gonna leave and try to come back in.
Okay.
Well, it's a pleasure to have faces to go with names. A couple people I do know from home and from Louisiana.
Okay. Next door neighbor over in Texas.
Texas. We have family over there too. Well, since Amy and Jim are like logging back in, they know me very well. So for those of y'all who don't know me, well, one, thanks to Olivia for setting this up. My name's Canova. Short version is I was born in Ohio, raised in Florida, and I now live in Louisiana. I'm 40. I'm a mother and a wife. And that's the basic short version of me. If you don't have any handle on me.
Right, so we have Amy and Jim. We're still not getting video from you.
Yeah, I don't know why. We did sign in with video, but we clicked with video and it did this again. So we're here.
Well, you have to, if you click with video, it turns off your video on mine. The default is video with the audio.
But
So
however, you should be able to go to the bottom of your screen on the left-hand corner.
Okay.
And like you should have a red X around the video camera. And
Yeah,
if you,
we don't.
and if you, oh, really? Huh.
Yeah, it's weird. It says integrated camera. I don't know why it's doing this. Well, don't wait for us to figure this out. I don't want to hold everybody's discussion up. Go ahead. If we figure it out, you'll see us, and if we don't, you won't.
But we'll hear you, and that's important.
Yeah.
There you go.
Okay, well, I've never done one of these before, so this is my first shot, and I apologize for my fan overhead because I'm in my room, so my husband put my baby to bed while we have this chat. So is that bothering you relentlessly? I could probably turn it off if I need to. No, we're good?
Where is your tablet sitting though? Because we're getting really bad audio.
That's because my tablet's old. That has a whole lot more to do with the technology than placement, I think. It's about 6 inches from my face. Okay, how about this? Is this better?
It's just, it's tolerable. It's just got this like crackly to it.
It has feedback.
Unless you have a headset. Do you have a headset you can plug into it?
I don't. I don't think so. Okay, well, I'll do my best not to like over project, but since it's so close to me, if it's speaking too loud, you might get too much reverb because there's nowhere for it to go.
Right.
A little more gently instead of yelling at you guys. Okay, so everybody watched the documentary?
Oh yeah.
Okay. There's a lot to unpack there, and I have an hour.
We actually have 2 hours scheduled if you want to. I allow that time because nothing ever stops at an hour. So.
Okay. Well, I did want to go ahead and preface with I don't want to talk at you guys. Like, again, I've never really done one of these. I have a plethora of thoughts and a lot of things that came to my mind watching it and kind of being where I'm at in my own journey right now. So I don't want to talk at you guys. It's important for me that you know that, but I also don't want to feel like I'm just being talked over. So as, facilitator for this, if you guys feel like I'm not giving you room, please let me know. But, just make room for me too. Okay?
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. So Let It Fall. That's 10 years, 1982 to 1992. My first question when I was watching it that I wanted some feedback on was, for those of you present, how old were you during that time frame? And do you remember any other events besides the Rodney King event and the Reginald Denny event?
I was 17 and no, not really.
Okay.
In 82 or 92, or is it just that? Are you looking at which specific time?
Well, for that time, okay, for me, I would have been 3 to 16. That's my time frame. That's how old I was during that time. I'm asking how old you were during that time.
I was probably early 20s. I was actually late teens, early 20s, because I was in post-grad at that point in 92. And coming from the East Coast and Northeast Coast at that time, I was living in Boston. I wasn't very socially active, so I knew what was happening, but I really wasn't paying much attention to the activism part of it, just what was portrayed on the media.
Okay.
I was late 20s and into my mid 30s during that time frame. And even though I'm from Los Angeles, LA County, raised in Orange County, so I have my own connections to that whole area and that police department, I was long ways away. In 82, I was in the South already. And by 86, I was in Florida, and I've remained ever since. I've been here 35 years. So, and as far as what I remember, because I'm from California, it wasn't during that time period that I have my first memories. It was during the Watts, because I remember in the early 60s, being 30 miles away from LA and where all of that was happening. I was, 10, 11 years old at that time. So as a child, I had no idea what significance it was, other than hearing my parents watching TV and saying, we should be okay, we're far enough away, we should be safe. And seeing things going on, on the black and white TV, and not having any understanding of what they were even referring to as to why we would have to consider being safe. But that's my first memory of stuff going on in the community that, later on I understood, what that was about, but at the time I certainly don't. And Rodney King, I definitely remember that, but I was already so far away and not connected to any people of color to really understand the significance of what was happening to the community overall, besides what was happening directly in LA.
So I was,
For me, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
oh, okay, thank you. Sorry about that. So for me, just leave it alone, quit messing with it. I'm worried if we keep messing with our stuff, we're gonna accidentally sign out. So that's why I'm telling my husband to quit messing with stuff. Anyway, for me, I was from 3 years old to 13 years old, born and raised in the panhandle of Florida, what we often hear called the Redneck Riviera. So you can only imagine what that was like. Yeah, that was, Canova and I grew up in the same area once she moved to Florida. So that's how we know each other. But anyway, I remember hearing the name Rodney King. I remember very vaguely seeing snippets on the nightly news about Rodney King and the riots. Did not know any of the other names connected to the case. And basically it was, my parents would see the news start talking about something like that and they would change the channel, not because of race, but because of the violence connected to it. They didn't want me to see that kind of thing. So, and then after that, the only real remembrance I have of people talking about it very much was when people would start to take out a baseball bat or be a little violent with a stuffed animal or a toy or something. Everybody would yell, Rodney King! And that's kind of, it became like a signal for a joke about violence instead of what it should have been, which was a serious issue. So that's what I remember.
Okay. What about the events leading up?
Well,
sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
everybody answer? So there's still me, Antonio, and then Riddick just came in, but Riddick, you need to unmute yourself. So I was, between the ages of 8 and 18 and still living in California at the time. So it was actually extremely triggering to watch it again, having like lived through it. Back when I was 8, I was in Southern California in 1982. And then in the 90s portion during the Rodney King incidences, I was up in the Bay Area. So it was super intense throughout the whole state and how interactions went with everybody, which was really hard because we were starting to kind of have some racial unity going on in the Bay Area prior to this. Like we were just really starting to kind of come together again as people. And this kind of really tore everything apart again. And Riddick, you're still muted. So Antonio, what about you?
Okay. I was between 17 and 27. So I was 17 in 82 and 27 in 92. Living in Chicago and saw everything on the news like everybody else.
Yeah.
So Riddick, the question was what ages we were between 82 and 92 and what we may remember outside of just Rodney King and the riots and what other things you might remember.
I was young. I think 82 to 9, I was 9 years old. And I remember my dad, he was just pissed. And I didn't understand why he was pissed off until he went into the whole situation, what went down at the Rodney King beatings, and they showed it on TV. And I was like, wow. And that's when I really got the first actually in my face type of deal like that. It was a culture shock in the beginning,
Okay, well, I thank everybody for giving us a time frame because we were all at different stages of life, basically, when for the time period we're talking about, and sharing what you remember about it. As far as what I remember about it was a lot of anger in my house, my mother especially. I do remember the story. I always remember for your last name about Latasha and the orange juice, and that as well, like as a precursor. I remember that story for some reason. My mother must have known or something. But it's really important, I think, if we're going to have a conversation about a particular time frame to see where everybody was at, like developmentally speaking, to be able to kind of dig through what we're processing now, seeing it now. So I'm sorry, I forgot your name. Oh, Helen. Thank you for bringing up the media coverage, because that's a big part of what I was stripping away watching the documentary, was like the media spin and the coverage as far as the beating, the Rodney King beating, which is what set off the world or our country or whatever, however you want to look at it.
I think for me specifically is the early part of that time frame. I was born and raised in Brooklyn. So for me, it was all about the Central Park 5. That happened in '89, and that was just such a huge part. And growing up before that, it was the war on drugs, and then it became stop and frisk, and it then was the Central Park 5, all within a couple of years each other. So to me, growing up, that was everything, being in New York. And then in around 90 is when I moved to Boston, and I was working in school, and that was primarily my focus. I kind of lost touch with a lot of the media. And then, being in Boston, there was always that different mentality of East Coast versus West Coast. And you do have a little bit of bias between that and the way you view the news too. But I think my point of view has always been, it kind of flowed right in from the Central Park 5 to Rodney King. It was just a difference, a couple years really between the two incidences.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay, well, the media spin that I'm talking about is like, just to hone in on one particular area. It has to do with what we saw in the documentary when going over and rehashing all of these events. You know, they pull out the director, John Ridley. He pulls out, you know, actual media coverage, you know, news coverage about this, that, or the other thing, the way the print's done, the way the newscasters would speak about these instances and, you know, whether there was justice or not justice. Did anybody have any feelings about that?
Oh, I do.
One word.
Okay. Well, I mean, you know, my main focus, what's kind of come out of me right now, is this whole idea about the system itself, which, just to share with you all who don't know me, you know, I feel that we're all victims of the system. White, whatever, it doesn't matter. We all have gained these inheritances of living in this society. And so when we're looking at, you know, the white descendant, the current white person, and their inheritance that comes along with being part of colonist culture, you've got a bag you didn't ask for either. And how is that perpetuated in the narratives that keep coming through how some of these things are handled? So, or shape the world outside of the communities that they're in. So, that was when I say talk about the media, that's my note. My note says talk about media spin and coverage. I was really curious about like your feelings watching this documentary, seeing how certain things are portrayed from actual newsreel. And that's all they have.
So from the show, from the program, one word comes to mind with the media, and it's called gaslighting. They gaslit everything about what happened there, to the point where people had to look at it, and you seeing things happening in real time on that tape, and you had to ask yourself, are they really trying to convince us that didn't happen?
Right.
One thing I really
Go ahead.
One thing I really want to point out, especially since I was still living in the Bay Area at the time. So my, 16 years old when Rodney King was beaten, and when we were on the East Bay in the suburb area, and watching the news, it was still a continuous repeat on how he was on PCP, he was on PCP, he was on PCP. But whenever I'd go see my family in Oakland, that was not the same narrative. Like, I could get more accurate information from the news stations that were Oakland based over at my family's home there, and he never had any in his system. And so this media narrative that we still have today to vilify the victims of this brutality.
I had a similar thought to that as you guys were talking, was because I was in the South, and in what, like I said, it was called the Redneck Riviera. I'm curious if I was able to go back and see our coverage from our area at the time, how it would have been, how the spin would have been put from a Southern news station versus the California news stations. And I was, like I said, I was too young to really remember, and my parents would flip the channel. So I don't really know, I don't have any memory of that, but I'm curious what it would be like if we could compare a news broadcast from the South and a news broadcast from other places around the country. I don't remember that, but I think it'd be really, really an interesting study to see how it was covered in different places in the country.
Another word that came up with the media was biased. It was basically, still, even in the location and coming out with the nightly news, the terminology they used, the focus and the spin on the story was very much still in terms of those who were in power, which was the white majority at that time. So that's what I do remember, was that media spin as to was very, very one-sided.
Do you think that's different now?
I think that social media has changed everything. about how we view media. So I think that today you have so many different options and so many different resources to choose from, and you can always find a resource that has the same thought process as you.
I think as far as media changing, I noticed during the most recent protests, well, I say that we've had like several rounds of them recently, but with the George Floyd protest, I noticed that there was a big difference in how long a certain news source would cover that narrative and that story. Some of them, covered like, oh, we had 2 nights of protests, and then they acted like nothing was going on, like it was done. But if you went to private individuals' social media accounts, they would have live feed of they're at the protest and it's still happening. But some of the news stations act like it's gone, it's done with.
Yeah.
So I found that really interesting in a way that we are still dealing with that kind of bias. We saw in the Panhandle of Florida, we saw the same thing after Hurricane Michael, for example. The rest of the country, we were in the news like a day or two, and then they moved on. And so we were still struggling, but nobody saw the struggle. And I feel like that's kind of the same thing that's happening with these issues. I got so mad watching this because I'm like, I could almost take snippets of what was being said at that time and put it into this time and have it be exactly the same words describing the situations that we see now. And how is that possible that like 30 years later, we're still dealing with the same bull crap? And that's kind of what I took from it was because people, once the media turns their back, other people think it's gone and it's no longer a problem. So that was my take on the media.
So the media is always going to be biased because whenever they have a football celebration on, say, Ohio State wins the championship and they tear up the town, they never call it a riot. They don't even call it a demonstration. But when Black Lives Matter had their protest, they called that a riot, or they call that people rioting and looting and everything else. So the media spin is to push the narrative, to keep that divide going.
My own word is dismissive. When I was watching the media's portrayal of everything that was going on, it really was insignificant, ultimately, from the way they were presenting it. It was like, well, it's just another Black person that died. It's just another incident, no big deal. You know how that happens all the time anyway, because of a whole list of the biases and the prejudice and the whatever, the cultural systematic thing. And I'm watching that and I'm thinking, wow, how, even if someone really wanted to be engaged in the topic and really wanted to know more about what was going on, the media had so much power in being able to determine what was in our awareness and how long it lasted. So that is the difference to me now compared to that film as to what we're doing now because of our social media, as you were saying, that we have live streams now that are 24/7 with people on the ground, whether it was Standing Rock or the George Floyd situation or wherever. Now it's, if you want to tap in and pay attention in real time, it's still going on. Even now, we could still find people that are still paying attention and keeping the story going. But in the film that we were here to talk about, it just seems so insignificant. Let's just give it a little bit of information, we'll acknowledge it in some way, but then brush it away and move on.
And what was amazing about that was the guy who actually filmed it said it was kind of fluke because they had just got the camera and the wife was doing something and he went and grabbed it and then started filming. And like you said, Helen, about everybody has a camera in their pocket. So now we get to actually see it in live. Mm-hmm. And the difference this time is when Floyd says, called out for his mother, every mother collectively heard that across all social barriers, across all color barriers. That was primal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was really heartbreaking for me. And like, if you can't see the humanity in that, who cares what his record was with the police or whatever? And same with Rodney King. If you can't see the humanity of a person being beaten by another person excessively, I don't know what to tell you about who you are, because that's just insane. Like, I don't care if he was on PCP. I don't care, you know, whatever and I know he wasn't, but I'm just saying it wouldn't matter. What the heck are you doing? How can you do that to another human? I don't care what the situation is. Where's your humanity? Where's your compassion? It's just, it's just nauseating.
It is. It is. I mean, all that is very, very true. It's all, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's all true. At some point, it's like the memes that float around now about, you know, cops aren't supposed to kill guilty people either. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, that's not, you're supposed to be your go-to move, is to, you know, even if they had broken the law specifically for what you're pulling them over for or whatever, you're still not supposed to shoot first and ask questions later. And, so yeah, thank you all for your shares on.
There's one more thing about the media spin on there. The Rodney King was the tipping point, but before that, they had the little girl who was paying for the candy who got shot, and they, like you said, marginalized that Deborah.
That was 13 days after Rodney King.
Right. So that was like, whoa, this was all boiling to a point.
Mm-hmm.
So like she says, it was being dismissive. The media was being dismissive with both those cases. Then you had a LA police chief, Gates, who was dismissive on everything. It was his highway, cowboy mentality, go in there, break heads, whatever it took. So.
Well, I wanted to talk, thank you for bringing up the officers in the case, because in watching the documentary, we get to talk to or see a lot of these guys now. Like, I mean, they've gone back and they're the ones that agreed to be interviewed for what happened and these sorts of things, to kind of paint the picture of law enforcement for us at the time in LA. What were your thoughts on the officers? I'm going somewhere with this, I promise. But like, just, what were your thoughts?
I want to hear Riddick's thoughts first, being an ex-cop.
Oh, please do.
Okay, and I'm gonna be honest with you, I did not see the whole thing. I was up to the part where the guy was basically explaining when they were pulling him out of the truck, and he was going out there to help him. That's the part I got up to.
That's
but
good. That's good enough.
But my opinion on that, the officer, I didn't see I missed the officer part too as well. So I got to catch up. I got to do a lot of catching up with the guys. That's my honest opinion. But I mean, Antonio, what do you think? What do you want to say about this? Because me and you talk a lot.
So the police officers that were in there, they was under the mentality that first they were taught the chokehold, then they were taught the karate. Then it was like, we can't do this because it could possibly kill them. So with Rodney King, they was like, we're going to beat him to submission. And when the officer pushed his foot down, all he was trying to do was raise up, which gave them justification in their mind to keep knocking him down until he was going to submit. So the police officers were all following the command of, it was like a pack mentality, basically. Nobody had any rules. They would just like knock him down, keep him down. And Gates pretty much greenlit everything because he was that dude. Mm-hmm. When the military came over there, they were like, they told him, hey, we don't want you here. Gates told him. So he had this agenda. He was going to knock down crime by any means. And it's because of the Korean or the Asian young lady who got killed in a crossfire. So it was an exclusive area of California. So he sent swarms of cops out there. And their whole thing was break heads, do what you got to do, bring the crime down. So the cops there were all following Gates's lead.
Well, no, wait, I want to redirect real quickly because yes, that's what I gathered out of the event itself. What I'm talking about is, and I think you saw enough of this, Riddick, to be able to kind of weigh in. From the beginning of the documentary, you get to sit down with these retired police chiefs and these retired captains, and they're walking you through what they remember, how they remember it, and trying to tell you what happened from their side. Now, those moments, those interviews, when they have this opportunity to talk about something that's decades old and how they're telling you their side of the story, that's what I would love to know what y'all's feelings are about.
That was a disconnect. That was a disconnect because the people in the field were seeing one thing and Gates was sending out the orders to do something totally different. Because the one officer was like, I don't want to send my people in harm's way because he knew that they were being outnumbered. But Gates was like, you guys should have stayed there. So there was
Well, Steve
disconnect.
was nowhere to be found, and
Yeah,
that
he
is
was in Beverly.
that
Yeah,
is
he was in Beverly with her.
absolutely the truth. He was not even involved until after it was over.
I found with the cops, their interviews, I found they still had no remorse or no guilt for what they had done. That was what I came across, that is what they were trained in the police academy, and to them, they were following their duty to this point. And I came across, and even the cops that were interviewed just said, we were following orders, which is what we are trained to do.
Let me jump in on that one.
Yeah.
That's the biggest excuse that we use as police officers.
Yep.
That's the biggest excuse. The
Mhm.
key thing is we always say, oh, we're just following orders. We are grown men and women. We understand what we need to do. One. Number two, we have what they call a 72-hour blue wall of silence. When we do that, we get together, and that's when we formulate a plan on how we're going to attack this, how we're going to sit up there and flip the narrative to make it look like that we're innocent and everybody else is guilty. So that right there.
Mhm.
But
yeah.
at the end of the day, even if you had the 72-hour wall, they had that impunity that's across all police, and they have no recourse. That's how they got acquitted, because they were doing their job in their eyes.
Well, not just that, but the very planned move into an all-white community and an all-white jury. Because, okay, so living in the Bay Area at the time, I'm telling you, the Bay Area was fighting, and we had petitions sent out to really have this move to Alameda County so that there could be a good amount of peers that are of all races. Alameda County is very diverse. So everybody in the Bay Area already knew that as soon as it did not come up here or up there, that the case was lost, that they were going to get acquitted, because it was a white neighborhood. I mean, what else are you going to...
So back on the attitude of the cops, though, I cannot remember. I'm awful with names, but he was, I hate to say this, but he was kind of like the more Irish-looking, gingery kind of cop. I don't remember. But anyway, he almost seemed smug. When he was talking about the incident, he almost seemed like, ha, 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 look what I was able to get away with, is how he seemed arrogant and like you said, no remorse, none. But he even seemed beyond no remorse. He even seemed like almost proud that he had been a part of this. And like, I don't know. I didn't see any remorse or anything, but that one particular cop, I felt he felt proud and like he felt smug that he had done this.
He did. And the what you call it, the person that was representing Rodney King, he had a smug attitude too. He thought that this was in the bag until they flipped the jury over to the other county. When they had it moved, all bets was off, and it was like he got slammed.
Yeah.
He didn't take it serious.
There seemed to be one officer who seemed to have felt that what had happened was wrong, out of all the officers who spoke in that series.
Thank you for bringing him up. That was Theodore Brusino. He's the one who, swore up and down that at one point, in the video, you can see one officer go over to the section dude and is all like, what are we doing here? And they were like, you just keep him down, until he went back and did his job.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, thank you for bringing him up, because he's an interesting character for me in all of this. And it has a lot to do with this idea of justification. And justification, as well as this whole idea that, the whole one thing, not all cops are bad. Some folks have these moments where they really are questioning what's happening, but then what do they do?
And is that the cop that was driving away, and then he was close and he came back and he just was like, as a monitor, he was just kind of like there? Yeah. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah, the one that started to go away because they had it handled. Yeah.
Handled, right. Okay. Yeah, that's right.
Oh, well, no, not that guy. This is one of the ones that was on trial.
Oh, I was talking about the guy that wasn't involved in the actual beating.
Right.
That was the only one that seems that stood up saying it shouldn't have happened.
Oh, well, yeah.
I I remember what Canova's talking about. They were talking through the actual beating itself, and the one guy was like, at a point, I walked over to our sergeant or whoever it was that was just standing there watching and directing, and he said, I was like, don't we have anything else we can do? And he was like, no, just keep hitting him until he lays down. And my viewpoint on that, like I've tried to tell some other, we're white, by the way. I know you can't see us, but we're white people. And so I've been trying to tell my other white friends, like, you know, when they say, oh, well, they should have just laid down. I'm like, okay, at this point, when you have 4 people beating the snot out of you, wouldn't you be scared for your life? You would feel like you're in a life and death battle. So why wouldn't you try to get away? Because my fear would be if I'm laying there getting beat by 4 people who don't seem intent on stopping the beating, then I'm going to get killed. So what do I have to lose by struggling against them at that point?
Yeah, people are being brutalized for their instinctual fight and flight. That is an animalistic response in every single one of us. You can't help but resist. It's a natural response, period.
Well, and especially
Even if
at this
they're
point,
resistant.
I mean, especially at this point in 2020, if I'm a black man, and I'm sorry, black guys, I'm not trying to speak for you, but I'm just thinking, like, if I was, I would be terrified to get pulled over by a police officer. I would be terrified. Is this the day I die? So why wouldn't I try to get away? Because, you know.
And then when the cop turned around and says that Rodney finally said, I submit, I quit, or whatever, then he tried to clean it up and said, and we took him straight to the hospital. I was like, really? 6 guys, and it's like, yeah.
That's a tactic that we use. Like, for instance, I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm guilty as well. We have a thing about stop resisting. So when we sitting up there and we were apprehending somebody and that person resisting, just say if they're not resisting, all you have to do is scream out loud enough so the public or everybody can hear, stop resisting. And we could jab and we could hit them any way we want. So now when we're in front of the judge, the first thing they say, well, we did hear the cop say stop resisting. In the judge mind, that person was resisting, and that gives us the right to do what we want. That's a tactic that they teach us, and it's not cool. You know, it's not cool.
Don't miss Sunday's class about knowing your rights. Please get everybody invited because we address this.
All right. All right.
Interesting. It's another little thought that I had popped up as well. Olivia just brought it up. You know, this whole idea of self-preservation. You know, self-preservation inside of a systemic racist system. We have, as Black people, you know, ours is literal. Like, you know, it's a literal fear. I myself have had unpleasant encounters with law enforcement. I have never had bad encounters. They've just been uncomfortable. I've also had a handful of ones that just went routine, and it was just, you know, be careful or watch your speed or whatever. And I didn't have any kind of lingering reflective moments about it. But what you just brought up and what Amy brought up about, you know, watching that beating, if somebody was doing a dog like that, that dog is going to bite. You know what I mean? It's going to bite because it's scared and it's trying to get out of this really bad situation that they're pretty sure they could die from. And there's no help. There's nobody to help you. You're alone. So that sort of dehumanization aspect that comes along with, you know, why we talk about, or some of us, you know, talk about this concept of othering, and, you know, we draw these racial lines and all of that because everything's good until this point. Well, you know, me as a Black person, there's some limit in somebody's mind about what I'm capable of, good or bad, you know, or my understanding for something or whatever. So
and I got something else out of that too. There was 3 people in the car. So they definitely targeted him, probably because he was the biggest and he was the driver. The other 2, they let him go. Right. So they definitely had something on their mind besides just to stop and give him a ticket or whatever.
Well, you know what?
He was a big dude. So, I mean, that whole white supremacy thing, he was a big Black guy. Yes. And there, hey, look, here's this really big dude. Let's beat the absolute shit out of him to prove that we're better.
Yep.
The idea of self-preservation, thank you, I forgot about the other 2 you know, people that were riding with Rodney, but that was what I thought about too from law enforcement's perspective. Doesn't make them right, not condoning it at all, but they have just spent minutes just beating the shit out of this guy, right? If his crew, the other two folk, complied, right? They've complied, they're laying on the ground or whatever the case might be. They might have got scared because, they might have gotten scared. And if Rodney got up, then the rest of them could get up, and then they could be an issue as far as whatever they thought they were doing. If they were justified in their actions. Now, it's not right at all. But if I'm taking the time to look at it from these people's perspective, I questioned that when I was watching it. Because I didn't know until I watched that documentary there were more people. I thought he was alone. I grew up thinking that he was alone and this was an isolated incident. And so when I found out there were two other black men that had also been, taken out of the car, they were laying on the ground or whatever the case might be, they were complying. It got me thinking that after they have beaten their friend, they couldn't let up that strong arm, because what if the other two black folks rise?
But they had already let them go. They had let them go because they went across the street to go answer the phone.
Okay, I didn't know that. When I was watching it, I saw it and I was just like, are they still there? Because if they're still there, then maybe that's part of this.
The lady told them there was a payphone down the street, and they would turn around and they were just looking for a phone. So they was already gone.
Okay.
Rodney King was by himself.
Okay. But well, thank you for clarifying that, because, facts are important for factual events. So thank you for clarifying that. But it got my head spinning in these broader senses of, if there's more black folks in a car and you got one person subdued, do people get scared because we have less whatever they've been trained to believe, that we're not as civilized, or we're not this or we're not that, depending on the area you go into? Does that happen? That's my question. Is that like a thought process that can flow through their minds? Because training's bad. I don't know. That's my question. If anybody can answer it or offer anything.
Well, Canova, I can tell you that one of the most difficult parts of watching the film was, and other scenes like what happened with George Floyd, how many people were witnessing what was going on. Not only the police themselves, they were just standing around talking like they were having lunch or a coffee break, while over here, somebody's being beat to freaking death. And they're just all like, it's no big deal. And then the witnesses that were filming it, of course, certainly were doing their part, but what would it be like? I cannot personally imagine the men that were with him that knew their friend was being beaten to death, probably, and they weren't able to do anything about it, that they had to constrain themselves in a way that I cannot imagine what that must be like, to have to constrain an anger, a rage, the survival, trying to want to help and be part of a solution of some kind. I don't know what that would be like. And
actually in that same program, what you said you can't feel like, it's when those gentlemen were beating up Denny, and one guy was like, I got to save this guy. And it was like 3 people that surrounded him. One drove the truck, one protected so nobody can climb on, and they took him to the hospital. And they said if he hadn't made it within 2 minutes, he would have died. Right. So on the flip side of what you said, you can't imagine, there was the flip side where somebody did imagine and they did step up.
But that was, not to argue, but that was those weren't police officers, so maybe they felt a little safer stepping up. My interpretation is, if I was a police officer in 2020, just trying, again, to empathize and think what I would be feeling in these situations, I think the fear from that side is going to be even more now, because when you do pull somebody over, if there are multiple people and you do legitimately have to restrain someone, are those other people going to act out against you because of the climate, because of the fear? Like Jem and I have talked about, we're almost to a point now where we feel like are cops going to become targets? Innocent cops, not the ones that are out doing bad things, but the people are going to say, look, there's a cop, let's beat the snot out of him, because
shoot him or whatever.
Right, because we know that, a cop equals bad. So I think that it's a little different when you have a police officer there beating somebody, but at the same time, I think by those actions, those police officers are actually putting their own lives at risk too, because in that situation, they're in a neighborhood, they've got people around. what was to stop the people around them from coming and outnumbering them and just taking him down right then when they were beating him?
Management by fear.
Fear.
That's
I guess.
That's all it is. It's
It's
fear.
run. Management by
Retaliation. Yeah, it's
fear.
fear. Yeah, that's
Well,
all it is.
I'm sorry. Go ahead,
It's
Riddick.
okay. No, it's okay. Go ahead, Clover.
Well, what I took from what Deborah, I think Deborah, my interpretation of what you were saying, is like the bystanders, even nowadays, the bystanders that are recording these things and giving it to us in real time, and you can see these kind of crowds to a certain degree trying to get these officers to just step off. You've got him, get up. Why are you still holding him, like that sort of thing? Are you asking why nobody gets involved then, like physically gets involved, or what's your question? I'm wanting to make sure.
I don't know that I had a question more than the observation of seeing the witnesses around, and because of, I'm assuming it would be fear of getting involved, like all the people that were around George Floyd, watching a man being murdered in the middle of the street. There were people all around, and that whole thing about survival, the idea of wanting to, like you just said about the crowd, the idea of just coming in and saying, get the fuck off of this man, and ripping him off, even at the point of getting shot and killed and arrested for, rioting or whatever. But the idea of being able to, for whatever the reason, standing there, even screaming and yelling, get off him, but nobody did anything to make that happen. And what is that like? I just can't imagine for myself. So that's what I meant. As far as being in an audience like that, watching someone being murdered, screaming, stop it, stop it. But that's all I feel that I can do is scream, stop it, and that's not stopping it. What is that like to walk away from that, knowing that helplessness, that sense of, it's been difficult for me to process.
Yeah, I
As
think
a police officer,
in the back of people's minds, they still realize that police officers have batons, they've got guns, and they have weapons that they can do. And that way you don't want to put yourself at bodily harm as well. And I think that's some of those actions too.
Riddick, what were you saying?
just to add on to that, because you got to, the key thing about police officers, especially when we patrolling low, I want to say the bad neighborhoods, we have to instill that fear that we the biggest gang of all gangs. There's no gangs out there bigger than us. So that's what we do. We go out there, we instill that fear. Now, just say if I'm that police officer that pull over that person that videotaped it, and I harass it and I scare the shit out of her. Now, all of a sudden, weeks or months later, you see that same officer putting my knee on that person's neck. You think you're going to approach that person and tell them, you're going to tell them to get off, but I'm going to look at you like, what you going to do? You know me. You've seen me before. You know what I'm capable of doing. So that's what it is. The key thing about everything that goes down is
Intimidation.
fear.
Intimidation.
Bingo. And we do it very well. Guns, batons, and we could use a stun gun. Scare the crap out of people. I don't know if anybody in this group got shot with a stun gun. I did. It hurts. It is not a good feeling. So it's all about fear and intimidation. That's all it is.
So Riddick, am I understanding that what you're saying is that it's not that isolated incident? The police have this power over the community historically,
Yes.
and so when something
Yes.
happens, people have that historic idea that this is the way things work, and I better sit down and shut up or
Yep.
watch my toes. Yeah, okay,
Yep.
I gotcha.
But see,
So,
here's the thing.
so it's equivalent to a Pavlov dog effect. The experiment where they made it ring and then the dog was salivate or whatever. When the police lights come on, it naturally sets off a chain reaction, regardless of if you did anything or not. It brings you down. Then when they come out and then they start their intimidation and psychological, then it's all downhill from there.
I actually have a story I can tell y'all real quick that's personal for me that was completely benign. I told Olivia this story talking about the Pavlov effect. Okay, so I'm in Louisiana. I'm with my daughter. We're at Walmart. I'm going shopping. Okay. I get through the shopping experience. I don't remember it being bad. She was little, so she might have been grabbing stuff or whatever. I don't know. But it wasn't bad. But I made it to the front of Walmart and I saw some police officers just hanging out front. And I didn't realize how much I have like a no eye contact thing in my head. Like when I see law enforcement, my whole idea is like to shrink as much as possible. I don't want to be recognized. I don't want to be noticed. I just want to get through and move on. But anyway, so this is what happened. So I get out the door I'm about to go home. Aaron's at work. It's just me and the baby. We are new to Louisiana. And I get across the parking lot and I hear someone going, ma'am, ma'am, ma'am. And I figure out it's me. So I turn around and there's this officer. And he has come all the way out of Walmart and he's following me across the parking lot. And my first thought was panic because I was like, oh my God, did she grab something? Am I shoplifting without knowing? Are they going to let me pay for it? Because I just bought out Smells Her money. I can spend $5 whatever she had. But I couldn't run at that point because he saw me and I realized that this was, I was who he wanted. So I had to stop and I was like, yes, sir. Yes, sir, officer person. And it was a meet and greet situation. And they had these little Easter goodie bags for children. And he had seen me with my daughter. So he was just bringing me this stuffed animal, a coloring book, and some crayons. And that's all he wanted to do and tell me to have a nice day. So,
Wow.
I was so scared because my first
Yes. 'Cause I could tell you story. I'm sorry, go ahead.
my last little bit, and I definitely want to hear your stories because, like, my first thought, honestly, at that moment, wasn't about me. It was I had nobody to take my child. If something happens to me, Aaron's on the boat. We knew nobody in Louisiana. I was like, who will get my baby? And I knew I hadn't done anything intentionally, but that didn't. Just knowing I hadn't done anything wasn't enough for me to feel like this is just just hear the guy out. All because he was in a uniform. Now, Riddick, please tell me.
No, I would just want to reiterate what you were saying, that because me personally, I'm a former police officer, and when I get pulled over, I get scared. And I have to, I don't know if anybody, what was that movie called, where you have to basically disarm them? Like, when they see me, I'm 6'4", 250 pounds, so I'm very intimidating, and I talk very stern. So when they approach my vehicle, they see that my light, oh, big guy, so they're going to come up there prepared. So sometimes I have to let them know, hey, guys, relax. Here's my ID. I'm a former police officer. Once I tell them that, it's, oh, whew, I thought you was one of the bad guys. So but why do I have to do that? Why do I have to do that? Yeah. So.
Well, that was the thing, too. Is anybody else have anything we want to add on this? I don't want to cut anyone off.
Yeah, there's certainly something I wanted to add, and how they were even discussing the training of the police department in the comparison of the affluent neighborhoods and the bad neighborhoods. And that was kind of a wonderful admission of guilt right there, with them even realizing that, on how you have, Riddick, separate training for that bad neighborhood. You go in with the intimidation mindset, and you go in with the mindset that you are going to fill those quotas and make those arrests. And when you go to an affluent white neighborhood, you're going in to protect.
You're going to enforce in the white neighborhood, and you're going to control in the low end in the black neighborhood.
Yeah.
Bingo.
I think what I took from what Rick was saying about the cops getting relaxed when they realize you're a former cop, is that, especially if it's a white officer, again, we're back to this whole systemic idea. I think a lot of, especially middle class and upper middle class white people are kind of like, we get that whole socialization of, hey, there's a big black guy walking down the street and you're stopped at a red light. You might want to lock your door. Well, cops grew up in these same systems too. They're not totally in a vacuum. So if a police officer grew up being socialized that this is how things are, when I see a black person, especially if I'm in what could be a dangerous situation, which anytime a police officer pulls somebody over, they're at risk. The cop is, not the, well, maybe both, but anyway, so I think maybe that's why the cops, immediately are a little more tense, because of that socialization, because they have been taught as well that black may equal a threat.
Well, and it goes so
realize
far
it.
back.
Yeah, exactly. It's way, that's like childhood stuff. That's their parents bringing.
No, I'm talking, police
That's the slave patrol.
Tell them how police were formed. That's really, let's get back to that.
Slave patrols.
Slave patrols
the patrols.
heavy got police officers. So you really have to take that into consideration. It goes way beyond us growing up
Rooted.
in a racist system. It starts with slavery.
And then on top of that, we got to take in mind that the police unions across America protect good and bad cops.
Yes.
So it perpetuates the good and, I mean, protects the bad, and the good is covered too.
Unless you're a black cop who is standing up for the right and doing the good things, then you get fired.
Listen,
No,
I could tell
you
you
get
guys.
fired
I could tell
and you get you get fired and the city pays out a $20 million lawsuit.
No, this is what you get fired, but here's the kicker: you're going to get put on desk duty. You're going to be put on desk duty.
There's
Guys,
actually been a rise of women and men who have been getting fired and not getting their pensions because they stood up against these white brutality cops.
Well, I want to redirect back to Riddick and what he was saying, because I think it's really important about the whole desk duty thing.
No, I could go deeper than that, because there was a situation. I'm not gonna try to hog it up, but it was I was a rookie at this place housing, right? And there was a situation where this cop basically walked up on this guy on the roof, and when the door opened up, the cop shot the kid unarmed. And he worked in my precinct, and I'm gonna curse this mother, huh?
You freezing.
Oh, what part you heard? I'm sorry.
I heard
kid
about.
got shot. Kid got shot.
The kid opened the door, opened up. The cop shot the kid. The kid was unarmed. This guy is a piece of shit. He's a racist motherfucker, and nobody liked him. So we came in, okay, guys, we got to come back in, and we got to come up with this, like I said, the blue wall of silence. So most of the black cops and even the white cops was like, you know what? We staying out of this one. So the union got together, and they put him on desk duty, paid leave, and he got acquitted. He got acquitted. He just got transferred and got out on his pension. So
or if they don't do that, they'll move to another district or another city and still do the same shady stuff. Yeah. Because there was a lady who shot this guy who was walking back towards her. And she got fired, and she got rehired in the town right next to her in Oklahoma, like 2 years ago.
That's what they do.
So, yeah. So the police union from back then and now has not changed. It's again, until they get some defunding in there and get some help for different things instead of sending out the brute control posse out there. Yeah.
Well, what are some of y'all's thoughts on dealing with the documentary as our jumping off point? The officer, we can all kind of agree on the dude who rolled up on the Rodney King instance, and they were like, we got it handled, and I guess he left that guy who were kind of on the fence about, you know, he's not all bad, but maybe he could have done more, like that guy. Okay, taking his spot and looking at it here, what are y'all thoughts on responsibility and intention versus disregard? Because the reason I say that is because, like, for me, his intention was to go ahead and go by because they said he got a call, and they're like, no, we got to handle. And he's like, well, we're right here, so let's just go ahead, right? He gets there, he sees what he sees. And I realize, if I may, I'm backtracking a little bit, but I realize that cop culture is a culture, so it's, you know, I'm not trying to, like, say this guy had a whole lot of options inside of being a police officer. But in that moment, he sees what's going on, has some thoughts on it, but he doesn't do anything. Okay? That's dismissive to me. It's a disregard for what is right in front of your face. Until you get called out on it, and then you're like, well, I'd had all these feelings, but blah, 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 blah. So, I mean, like, what are your thoughts on that? Like, this whole idea about, you know, if the intentions are good, but nothing happens.
That was he rolled up. It was wrong. He saw other people doing it. He drove away. It's not my problem. Cover your ass. It wasn't my situation.
But we're only hearing now in this documentary that that's how he felt.
Right.
He did not speak up when the riot happened. He did not speak up when Rodney King was beaten. So I call it bullshit.
Here's the thing with that, guys. I agree with you 1000%. But we have in there, we call retaliation. If you turn your back on a police officer in uniform, they're going to make your life living hell. Trust me, it'll make you want to quit, resign, or get injured. That's what they do, retaliation.
And
Right.
we fast forward to now, and with the Floyd situation, you had 4 cops. One of them turned around and said something about, hey, this guy's coding out, and they still kept going through there. The Asian guy was his brother-in-law, so he wasn't going to do anything. And the 3 people that was holding them down from the backside where people didn't see, only one person said something. And like you said, out of retaliation. So what they all said is we were listening to the head guy who had his knee on this guy's chest, on neck. So it was covering their own ass and fear of retaliation.
I think we need to look at where we were in America at that time and not necessarily to use the 2020 view, but to look at it as 1990 and where we were coming from, especially or even in the mid 80s when it first started. So you have the 1970s, you had very much of a recession, you had the gas crisis, you had the issues going on with Russia and the Cold War. 1980 happens, you finally have Ronald Reagan, who is, from California, who's staunch Republican, come in with the cowboy, and I'm gonna have the war on drugs, I'm gonna take care of crime, I'm gonna do what is right with the white mentality. So we have to look at that in terms of where we were as a country a lot of times. And we may say it's bullshit now, but that wasn't where we were in.
Okay. Now, to add to your point about where we were, when Rodney King got beat in 90, 91, 92, that's when the police were militarized.
Yes.
And they had cami. We grew up, no matter what our ages are, when we saw policemen, we saw them in shirt, pants, shoes. We didn't see them in camis and military gear.
No.
And those guys had military tactics and military when they were beating Rodney King. So.
And just to bring the point on that, I was, I grew up in, New York City and Brooklyn, and you want to talk about stop and frisk. That was a huge part of that culture going into the 80s, and the militarization of the police, all over,
My question.
Oh, sorry.
Well, I was going to say, my question for Helen is my question for you, and I appreciate your framework, laying all out different things for different areas and where we're at as a country. And I don't disagree that these things, but I know that how I feel about it is that the only reason we can take this Rodney King model and overlay it with this 2020 situation is because it's the same thing.
Gonna say.
There isn't a big change. So holding officers.
The only change is back then one person filmed it. This time we had a lot of people filming.
Yeah.
But yes, that's true. We got a little more footage to say, no, this is what happened, versus just having to take the story that's handed out after the 72-hour wall of silence that I've just now learned about, things like that. But I just wanted to address that a little bit because I think that it's important to remember that when we start talking about it, now is not a new problem. It's not a new problem, and it doesn't even look different. It's just we got more people with their phones saying, look at this, see it, here it is. And I think that's why I feel comfortable laying 91 over 2020 or in everything in between, all the way back to the civil rights era. I mean, we can keep going, because,
but here's the thing. What Helen was saying was the points where we were. Like, I was 17, somebody was in their 20s. Our mentality and how we see things is different. Somebody was 8 years old when it happened. You don't even know what cops are except they're officer friendlies.
right.
So now we're at a different stage in our lives where we're 30, 40, 50, 60, whatever, and we see a prism from a different lens.
Yes. No, I agree with that. I agree.
And yet the craziness to me is that it doesn't matter, it seems like at this point, how many people are videotaping it. It's not stopping it yet.
That's true.
I mean, that's the crazy part. I don't care if it's one person 20, 30 years ago, or there's 3,000 people doing it. They're still murdering people in front of the friggin' cameras. What the hell is that? What
So
the
what
hell
happened?
is that?
So what happened is in New Jersey, they had a police force that got disbanded,
Yes.
not defunded. They got disbanded, and then they rehired them
Mhm.
as a different entity, and they got the mental help and everything. And their crime rate and their killings went down like 80%.
Antonio,
So there was a model.
just to expand, I was living there. I was living in Philadelphia, and the county in New Jersey you're talking about is Camden, which is
Yes.
directly across the river
Yes.
from Philadelphia. So now you have Philadelphia, which is one of the top 10 largest cities in America. You know, you have your own issues. And then you have Camden, which was rated one of the poorest neighborhoods in America, and also one of the least educated, and also one of the highest crime rates in America at that time. Not the highest, but one of the highest. So yes, you're absolutely correct. They disbanded the police. They rehired them. They became much more of a community-focused police force. So they demilitarized them. They actually got them out of uniforms. And I think the uniform itself has a lot to do with some of the perceptions we have when you come in with street clothes rather than the full-on gear. And they were actually part of the community rather than being in their separate corners. I totally understand where you're coming from, Antonio. I was living and very aware of what was happening at that time.
And right now, the people that keep screaming about defund thinks it's about abolishing, and it's about reallocation of funds. So back to your question, Deborah, about how things can change. When they spin the narrative of putting social services, mental health, and different things instead of just a military force, then that's where the hope lies, so that the killings can stop and the police brutality does subside.
Yeah.
I just
Can
want
I
to
inter-
into it. Okay.
No, well, I was just gonna, I'm sorry, I was just gonna interject on two things that I was thinking as you guys were talking. So I was thinking about the whole cops come up and want to say something but don't say something kind of thing. Yes, there's the brotherhood and like you were talking about, Riddick, the retaliation. And I think also maybe it's the futility, knowing that even if you say something, nothing's going to happen and nothing's going to change. So just as an example, I'm a school teacher. And so I had a teacher that worked next door to me one year that would scream and yell at the children. And these were kindergartners. This teacher did not need to be teaching. I reported her multiple times to the administration. I would call the administration while she was yelling at the children and let the administration hear her on the phone yelling at these kids, and nothing was done. And I was also then seen as like, oh, well, you outed your fellow. What were you thinking? So I think the cops too, sometimes maybe it's what's the point? I'm risking my career. I'm risking all these things and nothing's going to happen anyway. And then the second thing that just hit me about the uniforms, police being in uniforms, I think that does help them justify some of what they do, because it dehumanizes them too. You know, I could be any cop on any street corner just because, you know, so maybe that's for some of them, they feel less human, so they treat others as less human. I don't know, just a theory.
What I was gonna add to that is, if you want to stop this police brutality, I guarantee you, once you tell them straight up honestly, if you shoot and kill or hurt anybody like that, and then you find that you're liable, take their pension. Take their pension. Hit their pockets. It will
But see,
stop.
the only way they could do that is they got to break that stranglehold of the unions.
That's true.
Bring a citizen board on there so they can negotiate in good faith. Because if you put insurance on the police and they had to pay for who they kill or they lose a lawsuit, then of course they'll think twice about killing somebody. Absolutely.
What I'd really like to see, like I was reading some articles here on the board that, you know, decides if this is qualified immunity or not, right, is they're all police officers, they're all sheriffs. And we all know this blue silence. And I think one of the easiest things that would be to do, at least right away, that could be easily done, is form a community of citizens to be that accountability board to the police officers. They should not be deciding if there is going to be action taken against these officers. We as a community should.
I agree.
So if you
Just
put
like a
two,
jury.
if you put two from the police and two from the community, and it can come up just like a jury where it convict, then that could possibly work. Because
Right.
then the
That's a game
pressure wouldn't
changer.
be on the
That's a game
police.
changer.
Because then the
That's definitely
police
a game
wouldn't be feel like, hey, I'm doing this all by myself and I'm on an island. But you know, that's where the legislation comes in. You got to get people, politicians, that's willing to do that.
Well, they just, they did not pass the bill to end qualified immunity here in Louisiana.
They're not going to do that. They're not going to do
Right.
that. Because right now it's a political year and nobody wants to be behind the defund police or taking away police's ability to do their job.
Colorado
I've heard a lot of that. I listen to NPR occasionally, you know, and I've heard a lot of that people say, oh, well, they're not going to tackle anything until after elections, because whether they're afraid of, I guess these people who are the incumbents are afraid of doing something to piss off the voters. So it seems like a lot of these issues are getting put on the back burner until after the election. The problem is then those people will go, oh, well, crap, I'm going to pass the buck too. You know, maybe, I don't know. It's irritating.
It's not just the incumbents. When it comes to politics, because of how divided the nation is in general, a lot of moderates don't want to do anything too terribly radical, because defund the police could be the one thing that they aren't completely for with the rest of your platform. So if it's a highly polarizing issue amongst the white majority, then it tends to fall to the sidelines in an election year, because moderates are hoping that those swing people will fall their way, and then they might get around to it. But they know if they come out and they say this, then they become a radical candidate, and that's why, and they'll never progress. So they can't even get in there and do anything. And that's just poli-sci. It's just that's what I've experienced as far as my civilian foray into the study of the political system here in the States.
Well, they don't want to hurt their pocketbooks.
Well, yeah, there's that too. You got people, they got to pay for these campaigns. Somebody's got to donate the money. If the donor isn't for it, I mean, there's all these, it's a whole bunch of, that doesn't have anything to do with policy and people in general. It's just getting.
I kind of, since we have a little bit of a policy talk here, just real quickly, I'm very curious because I've never witnessed this in California, but I was looking at the districts that I'm a part of here in Baton Rouge. And for example, I'm in District 8, and, you know, we're getting new city council members running, and it's beautiful. We're getting a lot of people of color who are running for these city council positions. And I'm looking at my district, and the woman who has the city council seat inherited it from her husband when he died. What
Wow.
the fuck? So she's been a city council member for the past 3 years because he died. I have never before experienced this, never heard of it. That would never happen anywhere else I've ever lived.
Yeah,
Is
that's
this
kinda
like,
weird.
Well,
Okay.
no, I,
We had an alderman in Chicago where he was in there forever, and when he retired, he put it to his daughter named
Yeah.
Mel, MELL. So it's been done before.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard about it.
Yeah.
And if you guys really want to know about what you're asking, there's a program called Rigged on Amazon Prime.
I watched that.
Take-
I've heard of that one. Okay.
Yeah.
You need to look at that. You need
Yeah.
to look at that. Yes.
Thank you, Antonio, for putting me on that one.
come here. I'm sorry, people, but come here. Come here.
Uh-oh.
Hey,
She's
cutie.
so adorable.
Hey, cutie.
And this is Mr. Riddick, and Amy and Jim are right here, but they don't have a picture. Why are you making faces?
I know, right? Look at that face. I miss
Oh,
you.
no.
Hey, hey, Annabelle, give me my hug. Give me my hug. Give me my hug.
Oh
Ah!
my God. Yeah, so
So Riddick, what'd you think of that program, man?
Rick, it was it was dope, man. It was good. I didn't know nothing about that. The voting. I didn't know nothing about that. Wow, wow.
Yeah.
What I missed? I heard a wow. I wanted to hear that.
No, it was about Rig. Antonio, he told me that he sent that to me to take a look at it, and I looked at it, and it was deep. It's wow.
You
That's all I
actually
can say.
you actually posted that in the group to watch it. I forgot.
Yeah,
Yes.
it was because of him. Yeah, he told me. Yeah, it was good, but yeah.
I just added it to my to watch list, so I'll get to it at some point. I've got a big list.
Because everything we talked about here tonight is encompassed in that. And we can go back and you can see where this came into play.
All I'm gonna say, Republic. Oh, yeah, go.
Go ahead.
All I'm gonna say is Republicans is playing chess, Democrats is playing checkers.
That's
Right.
it.
Right.
Yeah.
That's it. And they're playing chess on a 3-dimensional board.
Yes, like oh.
Well, one of the things I wanted to say and put in here, you know, I'm a documentary nut. I only have Netflix, so I have to, you know, borrow people's Amazons for stuff. But I'm really glad I got to do this and that Livy asked me to do this because, you know, just like Eileen was saying, we can look back over things that you miss as a child. It can also see how you get where you are now. You know, I've had a pretty cushy existence, so it's good for me to have all this awakenness as a grown person with my own child, looking at the world that my husband and I especially, want her to grow up in, and all the stuff I missed.
Yeah.
You know, like I said, those 10 years, that's 3 to 13 for me. And I remember Rodney King. I remember the trial. I remember the 3 days of rioting. Like, I remember it, like, fully.
And guess what? Your daughter is going to remember these protests when she gets older.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's gonna take that baton and she's gonna be like, I remember that, mommy.
Right.
Trust and believe that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to share a little something in case people haven't like seen the story I shared before. So when Rodney King when that incident happened, you know, I was 16. And my boyfriend at the time was a Black man. You know, I was 16, he was 17. 2 weeks after the incident, you know, things were tense already. But 2 weeks after the incident, me, him, and a couple of his friends were in kind of the border of Pleasant Hill, Martinez, California. You probably recently heard of Martinez and that Black Lives Matter getting painted over, right? So we went to the park. We were smoking a joint, a bunch of teenagers. You know, I'm the only white person amongst, you know, 3 other Black teenagers in our community. And we were walking out from the park. We were done hanging out. We were done getting high. We were going to go eat. You know, we got the munchies, right? Just a bunch of kids doing what kids do. And when we're leaving, there's a bunch of police officers in the parking lot. And they stop us because the 2 men in our group, of course, fit the description of grown men trying to rob a home nearby. And what was really interesting is, and this is going to be in the book that I'm going to write about it, I was removed from my friends. So we were all detained. We were sat down on the curb, and I was sat down probably a good 25, 35 yards away from my boyfriend and my friends. And I was looking at the situation because, you know, every time there's always an interaction, the first thing that happens is asking, you know, ma'am, are you okay? So here I'm being asked, ma'am, are you okay? And then they're being treated as criminals. So what had happened is my young self got up off my ass, walked over to my friends, sat down next to my boyfriend, put my arm around him, and looked at the cop like, what the fuck are you gonna do? Now, you know, we were teenagers, so my boyfriend at the time actually did not appreciate me inserting white privilege into that. But I lost that boyfriend because of that interaction. You know, he didn't want to get killed over a white girl, and that was just a very real thing going on at the time. I lost a lot of relationships at the time. Prior to the Rodney King beatings, we were really kind of coming together. Music really was bringing our communities together. They were really overlapping at the time, you know, with hip hop really taking this growth in the Bay Area, it really brought us all together. And so now we're getting ripped apart and divided again. And that was a super defining moment for me, because I've had so many Black friends, and I had that Black boyfriends, and I had Hispanic friends and Asian friends, and you know, the Bay Area is like this wonderful melting pot, and it really divided us. It ripped everyone apart. It was like going back in time into the segregation that happened to the Bay Area after the Rodney King beatings, and it was devastating.
Yeah. Well, there's like thank you for sharing, Olivia. I think I don't have a lot of apology stories, you know. Again, I grew up in the Redneck Riviera, just like Amy, and you know, my best friends and their children are my children, and they're all white, and they were always kind of like apologizing for their grandparents, or you know, trying to put me before I would go meet folks, and in a very loving sort of fashion, because they didn't know what to do with them, you know. And that's been a lot of my experience, and I have gone so far as you know, people have questioned I'm a Black person, because there's no way that I could carry myself the way that I do if I wasn't mixed in some capacity, you know. I mean, things like that it's just like, and you're just like, really, you know, like I don't, and I think if we all really sat down and thought about, really wanted to look at like how our lives have gone, and you know, those slightly uncomfortable moments that kind of get brushed over or whatever the case might be, we all have some story to tell, at least one. Everybody has some story at least to tell that comes along with this whole inheritance idea that I'm kind of fostering, to understand better where we're at and what we can do. I did get off of policy and certain things. I am not as well versed in that as some of you all. So, but I wanted to say that as far as documentary watching goes and things like that, I love them, even when they're painful to watch, because it's not till after things are over and you don't have to listen to the media spin. One of the things I wanted to bring up with the media spin was how the riots were covered, and the verbiage that was chosen, you know, and look at this, and it's a war zone, and this is, you know, this is uncalled for, that's attempted murder. You would hear all of these things during the riots that nobody said when it was just that single video, you know.
I think it goes to what, I think it was Antonio who said it earlier, that there was a difference between when people riot after a football game versus when people riot after a racial issue or a human rights issue, and the verbiage that they choose there, you know, is that's a riot. Look at these looters, look at these people destroying their own town. But then when you have people who are doing it for whatever, I guess the majority says is okay, then they're not, the verbiage is totally different. What I took from the whole rioting thing, and what has changed in my mindset in the last just 2 or 3 months, I used to be one of those people who would say, what the heck are they doing? They're burning their own town. Are they crazy? Where are they going to buy groceries? That's their grocery store. And now I say, well, yeah, I can see why they're doing that. I can see why they're this angry. I can see why they feel this hopeless. I can see why they're trying to get a message out they feel like isn't getting heard. And I feel like that, not that I think it's okay to go out and burn everything down and beat people up and all that, but I can start to understand a little bit of that rage and that trapped feeling. Maybe it's back to the fight or flight thing, you know. I mean, of course, there's some opportunists, and that's not even getting into the whole white supremacists showing up and causing problems issue, but I mean, among within the neighborhood, there are some opportunists as well. But that was my thing that I took from the riots and the Rodney King documentary, and kind of again connected it to recent events, was, oh my gosh, I can see why they were rioting. Look at all this bullshit they put up with before they got to this point of feeling like they needed to riot.
Can we?
And I agree with Antonio about that, the difference. The point is, in watching it, and why I'm bringing it up, is because you get to be cognizant of that. You get to see it. you can look at this and go, well, that's bullshit because it's the exact same thing. Why didn't they cover it that way? It's a active exercise on the things we've already lived through, but maybe we weren't there to have this presence in mind. And that helps to understand what's going on now and why everybody's fed up. That was I'm done.
I want to touch something real quick on what Amy was saying about beginning to understand about destroying of their own communities, right? And we really cannot avoid that conversation right there. Because you know what? Those are not their grocery stores. Those are not their corner stores. That does not belong to the Black people.
Right.
Okay, they have ripped away Black economy in this country at every opportunity. There's one, Leslie's the one who educated us on our last conversation that there's actually one left in Florida. But every successful Black economy within their Black community has been destroyed. There is nothing owned there. They're not destroying their grocery store. They're destroying some white person's or some Koreans or somebody else's, but it's not theirs.
Well,
And then to add to that, when all this happened in Minnesota, Target themselves says they don't care about the property. They
Right.
can turn around and burn it to the ground. We'll rebuild. We're going to take care of our customers and we'll take care of our employees. So it wasn't even about the property. It was about the principle.
yeah, I love.
And when the LA riots happened, they said it was 862 buildings burned and over $1 billion. But they knew that was coming. They knew that was coming because everything was boiling to a point, and at a certain point, it tipped over and exploded. And it wasn't Rodney King, the riot per se. That was like the final straw. But when they went to Normandy, and then they tried to arrest that one guy, and somebody threw a brick at the police, that kicked off the whole neighborhood where everything was burning. So everything has a breaking point. And then, yeah, everything has a breaking point.
Right. I shouldn't have termed it as their grocery store. What I meant by that was it's the one in their neighborhood that they have to buy food from. Not that they owned it. But you know, where are you going to go buy food that you don't have to walk 30 miles to get to now, because that's all there is in your area. Yeah, I am aware, and I did use the wrong verbiage there. You know, I have seen that and learned that recently as well. I'm on quite a journey myself, but that, yeah, you're right. It's not something that they actually had ownership of and a feeling of identity with. But man, I love Target for that. I was like, heck yeah, Target, you tell them.
Well, there's 3 concepts I want to leave you guys with. They're not really concepts, just words. They're words that a lot of this redefinition thing, so we all have a groundwork for when we start talking about things like what systemic racism is versus overt racism, what makes somebody a racist. Choose it? Did you inherit it? If you inherited it, are you still responsible for your part in it? You know, and how do you become aware of it when it's something that you've just lived with and that's your normal? You know, these sorts of things. At least that's what I'm working in. Just, I guess y'all know a little bit more about me. But the documentary left me with 3 words. Well, 3 words that I took it upon myself to like look up and kind of sit with. And you know, the first one is rage. You know, this notion of rage, what that looks like, what it's defined as, what that would feel like. We've covered it a little bit, like sharing our own stories and stuff, and also talking about the documentary. For me, I looked it up. You know, rage is violent, uncontrollable anger, or to feel or express as much. So, what does it take to get to that point? And just because, and like, how much attention do you need to pay? Like you, as a person who may not be personally affected by something per se, how much attention do you need to pay to be an ally, to be helpful, to actually work with somebody where they're at instead of trying to figure out where you fit or where it makes sense to you? That way you can feel that you're being the most effective you can be. Like, how do you meet somebody where they're at, and what do you need to be paying attention to? Self-governance. We talked a little bit about self-preservation, you know, which is just the need to survive, right? One of the things that I see very commonplace that is got more faces, like more instances I can use, is the idea of self-governance. And self-governance is the ability of a group or individual to exercise all necessary functions of regulation without intervention from an external authority. Why can't Black folks do that? What is so scary about self-governance that we can hold our own with law enforcement or whatever, that we don't have to be treated so otherly, like we can't do that? Where does that come from? That's kind of some of the stuff that I'm sitting with as far as trying to get to the roots of the problem. Antonio, you have a face, and I feel like I should open the floor to you if you have a thought.
Those are some interesting words, actually. I'm processing what you were saying.
Okay.
I'm just processing. It's like, yeah, rage. Yeah.
I mean, that's what a lot of this came down to me. If I was to sum up this 10-year period, you know, the breaking point you talked about, this boil over of rage, but it doesn't start there. It starts over here. And as a nation dealing in dismantling systemic racism, you have to, like, what are you not seeing? You know, why do you feel it's not that important? It's not a judgment like you don't care. It's that you don't even notice until it explodes. You know?
Well,
They see the results, but they don't see what led up to the.
Right.
I think there are stages of rage too, because you got that explosion of anger, which is usually symbolized by the rioting, by the destruction. And then once that's out of your system, then you start going into the, what can I do about it? The thought processes and rage. That's where your protesting and your marching comes through.
Yes. Oh, no. Well, no, yes. I mean, I agree that bad things don't come out of those rage. No, it's not always bad things that come out of the rage moments. And when it comes to people, people not of color, you know, as allies, a lot of good things come out of it, you know, once you're awakened to it. But there's this whole lead up before that is what I'm saying.
I think the key, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Olivia.
And we've talked a lot about the comparisons of, you know, what happened with Rodney King and what's been happening with George Floyd. And I think the one thing we haven't touched upon is the inclusion of the white movement with George Floyd. Before, when we were looking at Rodney King, and then we're looking at Freddie Brown, and we're looking at through the years what's been going on. It's always been the African American, the Black, the Hispanic communities that have been either rioting or marching or protesting. This is the first time I've seen the inclusion of the white or the LGBTQ communities gathering together as one.
See,
I was about to talk about this in a sense, because having been involved in marches and riots for a long time, that is not the same narrative for me. Right. However, what I can say from my perspective is what ends up happening is we have this big event, we have this big explosion, right? And we finally have some white people who will wake up and stand up and speak up, but then they walk away. Then the media dies down and that support system is gone, okay? Because we know the white people control the media, right? So if we don't have like all the white people keeping up the voice, keep standing up, keep showing up, keep trying to make policy. So this is why I believe like every time that this has happened, it dies down. And that's my biggest fear right now is it's gonna happen again.
Olivia, that's exactly.
Olivia, so hold on, Olivia. So for that point, even back then, George Bush, when he was president, condemned it and said this was horrible what happened. In the political field that we have now, we're talking from Agent Orange on down to the politicians that enabled them. They are not condemning this. So this right now is a total change in perspective and for them. This right now is light years from 92. People see the country divided at the seams. If it's not the Confederate flag, it's the racial stuff. So right now, the tipping point is coming. The reckoning is coming. This time, I don't think they're going to take the foot off the gas right now.
This is
I
the
really don't.
first time I've been truly active in the protesting. I'm out 2-3 times a week. Right now, I'm kind of waiting on that COVID-19 test, so I've been on the sidelines. But it's the first time I've been truly active, and I will tell you that there was a meeting or a press conference today between the St. Pete Police Department and the mayor of St. Pete. That's where I live right now, and they have agreed to start the defunding of the police department. And a lot of it, they actually did mention today that a lot of it has to do with the focus of the marchers and the common sense movements that have been going along in my community. We have been so active in my community when it comes to the marching and the protesting, and it has been a little bit of a difference. I can't say if it's going to actually, what will happen a year from now, but I can tell you what's happening today.
Can I? Great, and that is great, and that's wonderful. I want to jump in real quick because Olivia highlighted what I mean by like that whole slowdown idea. When I say what are you missing before the breaking point kind of thing. That's kind of what I mean. It's like, why do we have to cycle in these huge destructive, to get the country's attention, that's what I meant by it. Not that folks aren't doing work now, not that folks haven't done work in the past. It's just when it no longer becomes personal, truthfully, like it looks like things are getting better for this reason or that reason, or somebody gets arraigned and they get convicted or whatever, and we're all like, yay! And there's this kind of slowdown.
Especially with what, like with white people specifically, is especially those people who are new to it, may have never had to experience before in their lives, the loss that comes with being actively anti-racist. We've definitely lost members in the group. We've lost a moderator because of it. Like, this is a very real thing. So their fragility, our fragility, plays such a huge part in keeping this momentum going or not.
Can I just speak? I'm sorry, can I just speak to that whole thing for a minute? Because I've been thinking as you guys have been talking, and the whole, I thought, and I'm not casting aspersions at all, please know that. I thought this was the first time white people had been involved too. And then I watched Selma and I went, oh my God, this happened with Dr. King. The whole going across the bridge in Selma, and the first time they go across, they get the snot beaten out of them. The second time they go across, they actually make it across. Now, there were other factors too, but the second time there were white people with them. And I went, oh my gosh, there were white people at Selma? There were white people doing this too? I had never seen that. Never, I did not know. So no, it's not the first time. I'm terrified too. I am terrified that it's gonna boil, that people are gonna walk away and turn away. And I've already seen it on Facebook with a lot of my friends, is that when the protests were first happening and they were on the news, everybody was sharing videos, everybody was sharing Black Lives Matter, everybody was pushing. We gotta fix this, we gotta change this, blah, blah, blah. And now all of a sudden, nobody's even liking my personal posts. Nobody's, not nobody, but very few. Nobody's commenting like, yeah, you're right, let's do it. And that's frightening, because I feel like then we just go back. Why are we still doing the same thing since Selma? This is the same thing. It's the same thing over and over and over and over. And we still haven't fixed it. I mean, there's been progress, but it's not where it needs to be. So that is a fear of mine too, is it's going to die down on the white person side. And then, I mean, even in that, in the Selma show that I watched, they even said it. They even said that we could not have done this without our white allies. And so I fear that without the white allies boosting those voices, that the mainstream white people are going to forget about it.
Right. Well, racism is a white issue, and we need to be fully present for it. And yeah, sometimes it's really disheartening to see, you know, I've always lost friends and family members because of the stance I've taken for many years. But what's really interesting is to like, I paid attention to the white flight on my Facebook friends list. Ever since I committed my Facebook page to only raising Black voices, over 500 people fled from my Facebook page. I already knew the family members, like I had very few family members left because I've been doing this for so long anyways. So that wasn't a surprise, but I lost a couple more. And then yet, like I gained another one. Like my mom finally woke up and is having these conversations. So.
Yeah, I mean, the personal side of it, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go.
Okay, well, the personal side of it is very true, and I have a very fine line that I walk. I mean, everybody but Helen knows this, but I mean, my husband's white. We have a mixed child, so as we are thrown into the work that we're both doing for where we're at, it's personal, it's hard, you know, we have bad dreams, we have hard conversations, you know, but we live with each other, and we love each other, and so obviously, you know, because of where we're at in our marriage, we're going to work on it. But it doesn't mean that it's easy. And for he and I, as we do see each other as our forever and ever, so fingers crossed, you know, it's a lifelong commitment. But, you know, every white person can't go marry a Black person and live like I do. You know what I mean? So, and they don't have mixed children who get to worry about, you know, we get to worry about how they're going to be profiled or whatever the case might be. So that's what I mean by, like, what you can take in. Now, I am also a huge believer in self-care. This is hard work. It's overwhelming. If you need to like stop and watch, I don't know, some comedian or something, I fully support it, you know, because nothing is going to be worse than being debilitated. We can all be distressed by the situation. If you're not distressed at some point somewhere, you're really not getting in where you need to get in with it. But don't push yourself to debilitation, because then you're curled up in the fetal position. You're not helping anybody, not even yourself.
That was me yesterday. I really was. I didn't stop and do self-care. And yesterday and the day before, I was completely in fetal position. You know, I had outside sources add on to it as well, personal things happening as well, that just totally knocked me the fuck out. I was down.
Yeah, totally believe in self-care with it. But like that's, you know, that it's a thing. I mean,
I'm a proponent.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no.
It's just the consistency of it, that die down that Olivia has seen and watched, and as she's been more forefront than even I have. I've had a very cushy existence, you know, so it's one of those, I live as a Black person, no one ever take that from me, so yeah, I got my stuff, but because of my income bracket and different things, and I have 2 parents at home, and you know, all of that sort of stuff, there was a certain measure of how much I wanted to get involved. I didn't necessarily feel like I had to, because it wasn't right in front of my face. It was as a Black person, but I could always go home. Not everybody has that luxury. You know, home surrounded in very supportive Blackness with very smart people and 2 cars in the garage. Like, you know, not everybody has that. So I've chosen to be a little more true to that side of myself, because I still have the same problems. It doesn't matter that I've lived better than some of my friends. It doesn't matter. You know, it doesn't matter I came out of college debt free and have a BA. It doesn't matter that we own our house. I'm still a Black person. You know, you never get to shirk that off. So, and I don't want to, so that works out. But, you know, it's like the consistency of it. Staying, running with it, paying attention before it has to be these big raging moments to get your attention. That's what I'm
hoping to create within our group, which is why I keep saying, like, get involved, because at the end of July is the first sweep of people getting kicked out, because those people are not here to do the hard work, and I don't think that they have an understanding of just how hard and lifelong of a commitment this is. Been very active at it now for 30 years, and I still have a shit ton to fucking unpack. so much.
There's no check that says done. There's no check.
I just want to say thank you to, I know that Olivia, started the group. I don't know if any other people were behind the scenes when the groups originally started, but I just want to say that I'm so appreciative to have a group that's going to hold me accountable and help me learn and be a supporting place for both of those things, because living where I do in the Redneck Riviera and having some of the family members I have that I have had to write off. Some of Canova's stories about dealing with racism are from my family, which is really sad. But, I appreciate the opportunity to learn and to grow and to not be chastised for what I don't know. And yeah, I want to be called on it. I do. I want it to be pointed out, but it's being pointed out in a kind way. And it's the opportunity to do these things and explore these things at the level where I am right now, but being held accountable for continuing to grow. And so I just really, really appreciate that opportunity.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Amy. And Riddick didn't get to jump back on, but just to give a little bit of a background on how this group came about. Riddick I've known for over a year now. He's instant family, just like Canova has been instant family since meeting her. Riddick's almost 2 years of knowing him now. We were in a group together called the Blackout Coalition for Blackout Day. And the group was, set out for, building Black business, Black economy, really getting Blackout out there. And the group was for Black people, by Black people, stated in the description, and said at the bottom, allies who are here, just remember, this is not your place to speak. Sit back and learn. I'm all good with that. And one of the Black members had invited a bunch of white allies into the group, and the group just blew up with anger. And one of the most common threads of the anger and the rage was, I bet none of your white friends would set up a group. Why don't you have one of your white friends do this and see what they really say? And then Riddick and I were having a conversation about that, and we're like, yeah, why don't we set up a white support group and do this? And it just grew into this, okay, how do we want to do this? How do we want to get this done? And it was just going to be the Blackout Coalition, and we realized that there was an opportunity to make it so action-based, because so many other groups are really just people talking back and forth, and you see a lot of the white people asking the Black people to do all this emotional labor within these groups. And it's like, no, let's do something different. So I'm glad it's doing that. I really am so happy.
Well, I just want to throw it out there real quick, because I'm going to have to get off here in a minute. But as far as, I'm giving you homework. Don't want y'all to forget your homework. And just a gentle reminder, it's just 3 words to kind of sit with, think on, reflect. And whether you share it with me or the group or Olivia or whoever, that's not the important part. The important part is that you just do the work. And it's those concepts. It's, the rage, self-governance, and self-preservation, and how these things are factoring into some of the system that we're working so hard to dismantle.
Okay. Before we end, so Canova, now that you've done your first one,
Yes, ma'am.
you ready to do more?
I will happily do more. I do not have anything selected just yet. I will have something before the month's out. I mean, within my next 4-week process.
All right, perfect. And I may even throw in another one in between too, because there's so many documentaries and those are easy to get through. And then, so again, Sunday we have the Know Your Rights. And then I think it's the last Saturday of the month is the White Fragility. And we get to unpack that book.
I've got my calendar. It's the last Sunday, the 26th at 1 o'clock.
All right, thank you. I'll probably move that to evenings again, because it seems to be the best times for everybody.
I will let y'all know anything that I facilitate will probably be on an evening during the week, because it's easier for my family. But
weekday, so I'll probably move it from Sunday to a different day and do a weeknight for that one as well.
That would be helpful for someone like
And
me.
anybody who needs that ebook on white fragility, I do have it to share.
Nice.
Well, I ordered mine a few weeks ago. It was supposed to show up when Canova's on July 3rd, and I've received, so you want to talk about race, you know, how to not be, or how to be an anti-racist and blah, blah, blah. But I have yet to see fragility show up. So I got a notice from Amazon a few days ago to say, oops, it's lost. You need to reorder. So I put it back through the system, but eventually white fragility will be mine.
Well, you
It already is mine, but you know what I mean.
I want you to know that the next few are going to be a lot harder to go through, okay? How to be anti-racist, white fragility, those are relatively easy readings, okay? Our next one after that is Blood at the Root or Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, or the Willie Lynch letters. And like the Willie Lynch letters was my first huge, like, cracking open of this system and how it was built. So it's hard to decide between all three, but we're going to get really, really much deeper into this over the next few months.
I want to show y'all something real quick because I just ordered it. It's been in my wish list forever, but I'm going to read this. Oh, can you see it now?
No.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
It's a book called The Spook Who Sat by the Door. It's a 38-year retrospective on race rioting and relevant response. And it's from 2010 by a gentleman named Matthew Stelly. So that's on my short list. I'm going to be reading that at some point. I can read it first, and if y'all want to discuss if it's relevant or whatnot, I'll be more than happy to share my thoughts. It's probably going to be a tough read too, but just wanted to share that.
Can I make a request? If we're going to do a book study, I know it's hard to plan too far ahead, but what I've encountered is that when I do go on Amazon to order things, they are out of stock, which I'm taking as a good sign because that means a lot of people are reading these materials, but it does make it challenging to get it. That's what happened with the last book study. I couldn't get it in time to actually read it and be ready. So if we can have like a big window of time so that people can actually get the text and have time to read.
You know what? I will get the next 4 up there. How's
If you guys, yeah.
There he is. What were you going to say, Antonio?
I was going to say, if you go to a website called The Pirate Bay, thepiratebay.org, and then hit ebooks, you can download these books from there.
Okay.
I remember that. Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and log off. Again, I appreciate everybody's time this evening and, input and sharing. This is definitely a dialogue sort of situation. I am interested in what y'all have to say. I don't want y'all just listen to me talk when it's my turn to facilitate.
Hey, Cordova, before you go, remember, everybody, this is not a race for the swift, but he who endures.
Yes. I'm like, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So don't burn yourself out on the first leg. Don't burn yourself out on the first leg.
Well, thank you, Nova, so much. I love you.
Love you too, honey. See you guys later.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Olivia,
Yes, sir.
you still got that note that I sent you in the group, or was it private about the Pebble?
Oh, it was not private, and I've saved that, and I have shared that with so many people already. I love that. It applies in so many ways.
Yes, it does.
It